Hello and welcome to Quarantine Zone, a podcast for HBO's The Last of Us. We are your hosts, Andrew Sarsini,
Dwayne D,
and Tosin Andy.
We just watched the last episode of the second season of The Last of Us, titled Convergence. We assume you have as well. Total spoilers ahead. So let's dive into the aftertalk. But before we do, we've got some online spots where you can get in contact with us. You can write to us or email us a voice memo at quarantinezonepod@gmail.com. Follow us on X and Blue Sky at QZPod. Add us on iTunes and Spotify. Please like us, leave us a review. That's how we get noticed. But the best thing really is word of mouth. Spread the word. Tell your friends. This episode was written by Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin and Haley Gross and directed by Nina Lopez Corrado, who previously directed A Million Little Things, like literally that's the name of the show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Supernatural. Dwayne, why don't you give us a recap of this week's episode, this final episode of this season?
We begin the episode in the Pinnacle Theater during a rainstorm where Jesse is tending to Dina's wound, a crossbow bolt in her thigh. Over the stolen WLF walkie-talkie, we can hear a command to bring the boats back and to go radio silent. Jesse gets the arrow out, and sometime later, Ellie comes back to the theater to find them. Ellie goes to Dina's room and wakes her up. As Dina cleans up Ellie's wounds from the infected that she faced while protecting Dina, Ellie confesses to Dina that she kept on hurting Nora until she talked. But what she said, wheel or whale, didn't make sense. She's not really sure what it means. Dina says that Nora got what she deserved, but Ellie isn't so sure. Ellie tells Dina the story of Joel in the hospital in Salt Lake City that precipitated all of this. And she tells Dina she didn't know who they were, but she knew who Joel did. And Dina tells Ellie that they have to go home. And Ellie agrees. Jesse confronts Ellie on their way to meet Tommy at the rendezvous point. He puts together that Dina's pregnant, and he's upset with her for not telling him. As Ellie and Jesse approach the rendezvous point with Tommy, they find themselves in the crossfire of WLF capturing a Seraphite agent. Ellie moves to protect the Seraphite. Jesse stops her to remind her that this is not their war and implies that they owe it to Dina and the baby to come back safely to them. We find Isaac in a military tent planning an operation when Captain Park comes in to give him an update. She reports that all the officers are on board with what they're planning, that the rank and file of WLF might be scared. Isaac is preoccupied with Abby and her crew's whereabouts. They're AWOL. When Park is confused about why Isaac is obsessed with Abby, he explains that he had intended for her to lead the army in the event that both of them die in the operation. Ellie and Jesse make it to the bookstore where Jesse and Tommy had made it their base of operations. Jesse confesses to Ellie that he loves Dina, but not in the way that she loves Dina. And Jesse says that he fell for someone who was passing through Jackson with her family. He and Ellie split up as Ellie seeks to chase down Abby by the Wonder Wheel, and Jesse tries to go and save Tommy, who's being a sniper elsewhere. Ellie witnesses the WLF mobilize their numbers on boats, and we realize that the call to go radio silent wasn't about the Jackson Holers in Seattle. It was about this operation that Isaac was planning. Ellie tries to head to the wheel. There are some geography questions out there, but it seems that the WLF is headed toward Bainbridge Island, while Ellie is headed toward the Great Wheel, which is at Pike Place Market and the aquarium. Meanwhile, Jesse and Ellie parted ways someplace close to Elliott Bay. When Jesse headed southeast to Lake Union to relieve Tommy, Ellie headed south to the Wheel, and the WLF headed west to the Seraphite village. Ellie takes a small boat with an outboard engine, and during her progress, she's overwhelmed by a wave. The boat pitches Ellie out, and she swims with the current to Bainbridge Island, where the boat washes up. She's caught by Seraphites who don't stop to listen to her, assume she's a WLF, and start stringing her up to be disemboweled. But nearby, the WLF attack the Seraphite village nearby, and that distracts the Seraphites who are about to kill Ellie, and so she escapes. Grabbing the small boat that had washed up ashore, Ellie heads to the Wonder Wheel. When she gets to the shore, she goes into the aquarium that has a big whale in it. She finds two of Abby's squad, Mel and Owen, arguing over Abby's orders, and Ellie holds them at gunpoint and asks them for instructions on how to find Abby. When Owen goes for his gun, Ellie shoots her revolver, and the bullet goes clear through his throat and grazes the neck of his companion, Mel. He falls dead, and Mel, who's pregnant, tells Ellie that she has about 30 seconds left to live. please use her knife to deliver her near-term baby so it can have a chance. Ellie doesn't have it in her to open up the woman and take the baby out. She lets the fetus suffocate inside the dead woman's body. Tommy and Jesse find Ellie crying over the dead pregnant woman, Mel, and take her to the theater where Dina's been waiting. After discussion, Tommy leaves to pack the bags in the theater, and Ellie and Jesse suddenly hear him struggle. They rush out of the auditorium, part of the theater, into the lobby. Jesse is shot in the face and drops dead. Abby held the gun. Abby holds her weapon at Tommy, cowering on the floor beneath her. She has a rope burn around her neck, indicative of a noose being there. She's appalled to find that it's Ellie who's been hunting her friends. Abby points the gun at Ellie, who protests, and the screen goes black and we hear the bang of a gunshot. After the blackout, we find Abby in a room full of books and other media, sleeping on a couch. She's awoken by a friend and told her that Isaac wants to see her. She goes up and walks out and looks at her surroundings. We can see the WLF has basically made a farming and industrial commune that was once the Soundview Stadium in Seattle. And we get the caption that is where she was during Seattle Day One. And that's the episode.
It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, there were some side quests there.
Yeah, really. So let's start with you, Dwayne. What were your initial impressions of this episode?
I gotta say, I thought that it felt as if they were trying to get a lot done in a very short amount of time, and that some of it wasn't super necessary. They've got to have fidelity to the game. They've got to have fidelity to an established plot. But for me, the moments that mattered the most were, for instance, Ellie confessing to Dina about Salt Lake City, and Dina basically responding not with condemnation, but just like, hey, we got to go home. And stuff like that. Like stuff like Tommy and Ellie talking about community, which we'll get into later. Not Tommy, Jesse and Ellie talking about community, which we'll get into later. And Tommy even sort of like trying to emotionally relieve Ellie when they were in the auditorium of the theater and before he leaves to go pack the bags. It's just those moments of understanding who the characters are felt more important to me than some of the plot points. And I was a little sad that they pushed these plot points, and they made like big set pieces. Like there was this whole thing with the water and the waves and all that stuff. And I get some of the imagery there, like in some ways, there's like obviously baptism imagery and all this other stuff like that. But I don't know how important that was to having a meaningful season finale. What about you, Tosin?
Yeah, it's interesting episode. I think on one hand, it really helped show some of the character development sort of across the board, and the emotional and communal bonds in various factions. I think it also sort of highlighted the similarities between all these various players in this play and this world. But I also do feel like there were some elements of the episode that probably weren't necessarily needed and could have been omitted, that kind of seemed a little bit more forced than they should have. And I also do think that I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, but it's an interesting place to leave it off, especially for someone who has, further information on where the game goes. So, some of that, I'll be very curious to hear Andy's thoughts on that.
Well, my thoughts in general about this episode, this was a very frustrating episode for me. Having not played the game and just taking it like at face value, I feel like it felt both a little compressed to me. Like there was a lot of stuff going on that I feel like we should have spent more time with, like Ellie's time with the Seraphites on Bainbridge Island, and then simultaneously we spend a lot of time like with Ellie catching Dina up on the history of Salt Lake City, which I'm like, the audience already knows this, so I'm not sure why we need to rehash that whole thing again. So it was so it felt like, and we'll get into this later, I'm sure, but it felt like also that they're laying threads down for next season, which is fine, but it felt a little bit like
they could have done that all throughout the season instead of just all in the last episode.
Right, and it felt like they were servicing the future season that we have not yet seen yet, more
at the expense of a good
at the expense of yes, and obviously because of all that, I was frustrated by where this episode leaves off, where the cliffhanger was, but overall, I think it was fine. It's just not where I wanted to be at the end of this season, if I'm being brutally honest.
I felt a little bit like there's this old Seinfeld joke when he's in stand-up and he's watching a show. He's a kid. He only has so much time to watch it, and it's on the regular television, so it's week to week, and it was a cliffhanger, which was a rare thing back when he was a kid.
Right.
And he's like, we're getting to the end of the half hour. They have so much more story to tell. Oh my God, we're not going to make it.
Right.
Of course, he's saying it in his classic Seinfeld voice, like, we're not going to make it. Oh no. But I did feel a little bit like that. You found an article, Andy, that said something about this episode being a fake cliffhanger. You want to talk about that?
Well, I didn't read the article itself, but it was just the headline. But the headline summed up my
your feelings.
My feelings about it, in that the cliffhanger was sort of was a fake stakes, and also that it was a little confusing in general. And I think that confusing, not the cliffhanger itself, but the plot points in the episode felt a little confusing because they're servicing this story that we're going to get in season 3, and at the expense of telling a cohesive story in of itself. But we should get into it. We should talk about this, break it down. Let's start with Tosin about this title, Convergence.
Yeah, so, Convergence, as we all know, is things coming together. And we notice that the storm is literally, as well as figuratively, getting bigger for everyone, right? We've got opposing factions coming to a stand. You've got, Ellie's problems with her past and Joel. You've got Jesse and Abby, and just all the interconnected tissue between all of those. But the other unique aspect of that is, the problems of one group are not isolated to just them and their foe. They spread to others, right?
Right.
Yeah, totally. It's also, so I just want to say, there's this storm and convergence, and they even go so far as to say, and I'm glad they did this. She's like, the storm is a convergence. It's a lot of, it's happening. It's going to be like a big storm. I live with a person from Seattle, and they're like, dude, it does not rain like that in Seattle.
No.
And I got to say, my viewing experience was saved by the fact that they called it out as a convergence instead of just trying to push the idea that Seattle's just rainy.
Right.
I'm constantly being reminded that the city of New York gets more rain than the city of Seattle annually.
Seattle spits in your face a lot, but it doesn't
exactly.
It doesn't rain.
Downpour and rain sideways. Yeah. And movie rain is even it's even more dramatic than regular rain, right? Who knows where they get all that water, but they really get it done. But I definitely felt like they were, and this ties into what Andy was saying about all the stuff that they're trying to pull off of this thing narratively. They were converging the Seraphites with the with the WLF. They were converging Abby and Ellie. They were converging Tommy and Jesse with Ellie and Dina. All these different parties were kind of getting together. And in addition to that, obviously, we even find out what happens to Shimmer. So that was nice.
Right.
So another thing that I found interesting in this episode is, fairly early on, we recognize Ellie as someone who's been super tough. But as soon as, death and fear comes at you pretty fast, that changes and transforms who she is. we find that like Ellie fairly early on in this episode turns into a child and less the warrior or bodyguard that we often see, less the protector. And at a point, Ellie Ellie says like, hey, this was easy. That the lady that she killed in the previous episode, and that challenging Abby, who says, hey, she deserved to die, that it was meant to be. And Ellie was like, well, maybe it wasn't meant to be.
You mean Dina, not Abby?
Sorry, yeah, Dina. Sorry. And it's at that point where Ellie's actually being reasonable and sad and has tears in her eyes, and
it's a rare thing.
Yeah, is not this grown up that she wants to be. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I feel like in that scene, that's where Ellie is really sort of coming to terms with her own brutality, like how brutal she could be, and it scares her a little bit. It grounds her, I think, a little bit.
And it's weird because she's the only one who's really being scared. Everyone else seems to be supporting her, right? Like she's scared, right. But Dina's like, who's has like was wounded from this shit and everything, is like, nah, don't be scared. Like they deserve it.
I mean, it should scare Dina. It should scare Dina that's Ellie's true nature coming out.
Yeah, and I mean, part of that, it might be tied to the fact that when we learned more about Dina's past an episode or two ago, she basically was like,
right,
I lived through some terrible shit,
right,
and now I'm here.
That's a good point.
And I mean, it's just like there's this fatalism that is with some of these characters. Like they understand that death is right around the corner at any moment. And it's almost like as the main character who's growing up in front of us, Ellie's purpose in some ways is to remind us of these hardened people around her and the fact that we are feeling shock at this through her feeling shock at them. So I think that's kind of important.
Abby's little crew, her little mini crew of wolves, WLFs, with the little snippet of a conversation that we get from Owen and Mel, they seem to be conflicted about her leadership as well. So there's
everyone's conflicted about Abby. Yeah,
dissent amongst the troops. There's dissent amongst the troops between Abby's core lieutenants, and there's dissent amongst the wolves in general about Abby being special for Isaac as well. So, but I'd like to address that more a little bit later. But sure. Tosin, you got something else?
The universal truth that everyone shops at Costco.
That's right.
That is the base for WLFs. So
yeah, their forward operating base was out.
Makes sense though.
Costco.
Yeah, they've got everything in bulk too,
and
right?
and a huge a staging area already.
Yeah, so it's a good place to be.
If you ever saw the adaptation of the graphic novel "Why the Last Man," they're the post-apocalyptic group in that show also staged at a former Costco.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I was gonna say, when it comes to that moment when they're staging at Costco, I was taken by the fact that Isaac said, we've got all these sheep in wolves clothing, which is a flip on the typical phrase of a wolf in sheep's clothing. The wolf being something terrible and mean and smart that's hiding in like this supposedly dumb, weak animal. Here, he's like, I have all these like dumb, weak animals, armed to the teeth like a wolf. And he was worried about them. So that was, to me, that was pretty interesting. But
we've talked about how there's this convergence there on the weather. But one thing that Jesse also points out as he's moving through with Ellie, he says, you and me in bad fucking weather, because this has happened to them before. But the interesting thing that I sort of came away with it is that, yes, it is a storm. Yes, they're going through hurdles, but there's also some sort of kinship, right? Even later on in the episode, Jesse comes to once again try to save her, right? He's a rider on the storm, right? He's there, ride or die, right? And I think we'll talk a lot more about Community, but to me, there's quite interesting the way that he said it, but really he meant more than just, hey, you're bad news.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the stormy relationship situation that they're in, right? And he's surprisingly calm about it all. That's also a thing. But yeah, it's kind of, Jesse is a refreshing presence in the show. Let's just put it that way. I'm sorry I haven't seen it go.
Yeah, but I think also the part of that is that they are kins in adversity. Like they've been through some shit together, and Jesse's like pointing out that this is the situation that they find themselves in a lot, is the two of them leading through rough times, through adversity of bad fucking weather, as he puts it.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. Ellie's like Doctor Who, like, don't hang out with her, you end up dead.
Yeah, speaking of the two of them together, when they're hanging out in the library, there's this Alice's Adventure in Wonderland quote that's, everything's got a moral if only you can find it. And, I think that sort of expresses a lot of this theme of meaning, searching for meaning and lessons, even in their sort of crazy situations. And as we see with the story in hand, we see a lot of cyclical in nature, in Tigre Montoya, you killed my father, prepared to die, etc. So it's just quite precedent that they've added that little quote just in plain sight.
Yeah, they didn't need to put that on the wall. It's like you see it there, and you kind of get this idea that they're trying to convey that the morals in this situation are still nebulous. They haven't solidified yet. You know what's right, you know what's wrong, but in the situation, can you really make these choices? And that's kind of interesting, especially because here we have a story of effectively, you called her like a kid, a lost young person, which is what Alice was. And if you know anything about the story of Alice in Wonderland, aside from the awful rabbit, there's this idea of changing size, changing shape, and eventually in the sequel, a reverse universe through the looking glass, like a mirrored space. And when you look in the mirror, sometimes, especially with the casting that they've done, Ellie looking in the mirror, Abby's looking out the other side. So that's it led me think of all these things.
I think it's interesting that in that very same scene, just within moments, Ellie picks up a book and Jesse says, "You picked a good one." And so he's obviously calling attention to the book that she's got in her hand. And that book happens to be the monster at the end of this book, which is a Sesame Street book, which is about a character, Sesame Street's Grover, who is afraid of this foretold monstrous threat, only to realize when they get to the end of the book that they were the monster all along.
I think a huge... Yeah. So it's important to recognize that in Sesame Street lore, Elmo, Grover, all these guys, they're monsters.
They're monsters, yeah.
They're not cruel, terrible, gonna eat you up monsters, but Cookie Monster's a monster, and they're all the same kind of species as him. So that is important to know. Right. But and the monster at the end of this book, which we have, and which I have read to my kids very many times, you have you have this idea where he's all anxious about the monster, and he's like, where's the monster at the end of this book? What's happening? How do I get it? I don't want to get to the end of the book. I don't want to find out who the monster is. I don't want to have to confront him. And he's like, oh, it's just me, lovable Grover. Okay.
Yeah.
And you do have to wonder if that's what's happening with Ellie.
Yes.
You do have to wonder if when she comes to the end of her story, is she going to be the monster? Right? Is she going to be a cruel, what we think of a monster, cruel, terrible, fangs, violence, all that stuff? or is there going to be some twist at the end?
Right.
And I think that's a key piece.
Well, if you want to hit the nail on the head of everything's got a moral, only if you can find it, I think that's it right there. What is your nature? Who are you? Who do you want to be?
And the thing is, and what I like about the show is that it kind of reflects some verisimilitude with people as they grow. Who are you changes a lot. There are a lot of movies and TV shows and stories where characters are defined, who they are, what they're about, whatever. But in reality, who you are changes significantly over time, right?
Yeah.
Like your wants, your needs, your motivations, the way you'd approach things. And we're not immortal. So as we go through that cycle, our life cycle, and we change our attitudes and opinions about stuff to the point where we're old people, we don't care about anything. If you've been around old people, it's important to just recognize that Ellie is changing. And that's what last episode was really about. These changes, like they went year after year after year for 5 years around her birthday. And the person she was at the end of those 5 years was incredibly different than the person she was before. And even though that happened and we know how she ended up at the beginning of the season itself has done some changing. And I think it's important to just remember that we can't expect the character to always kind of come to the same conclusions. And which is different from in the game where, I mean, the character is you and you've got motivations to win. So you're just going to kill every fucking person around, right? This universe's Ellie, the TV show universe's Ellie, is kind of a living, changing, breathing thing. Personally.
Sure, yeah. Shortly after that scene, there's a sequence where Ellie and Jesse hide out from wolves who are attacking this little Seraphite kid, this Seraphite teen. And Ellie is compelled to go rescue him because he's being persecuted. He's the underdog. They want to strip him and torture him, and she's about to get out there, and then Jesse holds her back because he understands that they're outgunned, that this is not a fair fight, and what's more, that this war between the wolves and the Seraphites is not their war, which seems to Ellie to be a superfluous point to make.
This is wild. She's like, who cares?
Right.
And part of that is, we just talked about Ellie and her reflections, like how she's like, oh, I killed this person. I'm sad about it. I'm like horrified about it. Right. I think a bunch of people watching the show see Ellie going to chase down a squadron of wolves in order to save some Seraphite. And they're like, what the fuck, Ellie?
Right.
Like, this is like just terrible judgment. But what we've seen all season long is Ellie has terrible judgment.
Yes. Yes.
Like I was just saying that she changes over time, and she does.
Yes.
But at this moment, who she is, she doesn't have that kind of clarity. Dina is the strategery person.
Right.
Jesse is a better tactician, and she's like, let's just go in guns blazing, which Dina made fun of her about last episode. Like, you always just start shooting like to get out of here alive, thanks. So we're in this place where Ellie's like, the logic be damned, let's save this person. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the community aspect of that later. But, it's mind-boggling to me how Jesse could keep his calm and like rationally speak to her when it's so obvious that chasing down a squadron of these goons in order to save a person that doesn't even care about you is not helpful. Now, there's a lot of games when you would chase down those people, and frankly, it was like 6-2. And in the Last of Us game, Ellie and Jesse could probably take out 6 wolves, right? Because it's a video game, and you've got plot armor. But the show is treating it much more realistically, and I think that's great because it leads to, again, those conversations that happen between the characters you care about, rather than just having action that makes the story so much more real and meaty.
Yeah, another interesting element of this episode that that I saw was, Dina seeing the blood on Ellie and starting to have her undress and cleaning her as though she's cleaning away her sins. This is similar to what Tommy was doing for Joel to prepare him for sort of afterlife.
Being buried, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's
incredibly intimate moment, yeah.
Yeah. And it shows, it similarly shows that sort of love and that sort of dynamic, the cyclical dynamic that we've talked about. Now, immediately after that, when Ellie tells her exactly what happened, what Joel did, Dina, kind of shuns her and seems to get upset. And that was one thing where I struggled a little bit to understand Dina's motivations for turning on Ellie in that moment. It felt like,
when you say turning on, you mean like she to flip on, like to be angry at Ellie? Like what do you?
It was more like a cold shoulder and like more like I don't understand what you're doing, and like I'm ready to go home. To me it felt like she should have been more understanding. She should have known that, like,
oh, that's so interesting.
Hey, Joel was the one who did all these things, and even though Joel did those things, like he was still, as Jesse is put, a part of the community. And maybe in that moment she was reliving the moment where she lost her family, and like Joel, aka whoever the person who killed her family, was the one who sort of started stuff. But so Ellie's life was in trouble, right? And in this case, Joel's saving Ellie.
Yeah. So I definitely feel that Dina handled that in a very interesting way. And I kind of like how she handled that. So Ellie's like, the whole reason we're here is because Joel wiped out all those people. He did it for me. And on some level, if you think about the context, Ellie just threw her body against the infected for Dina twice in a row. Once in the subway, light rail, whatever. And then once in that building that was like, quote unquote, abandoned and like the blind spot, right? And in both of those cases, Ellie is like, it's not just a question of she doesn't get infected, but she could have been ripped apart. Like the infected are like, they're barbaric, right? So her life was in Ellie's hands, and Ellie delivered. And I think between Dina's understanding of how mobilized the WLF are, their resources and everything like that, in that moment, what I saw at the speed of thought was her being like, I'm not holding you responsible for all that, but we got to go home. Like, the guys came to get us and were outgunned, outnumbered. Like, she didn't have to say all that. We all know that as viewers. And when she said we had to go home, I feel like Ellie was in the emotional spot where Dina had the most hand. And of all the things that Dina could possibly want right then, with her leg wounded, pale in the face because all the the possible illness that can come from it, and being pregnant and vomiting every time she sees like a dead body, she's like, all right, if you're reaching out to me and saying, I need you to support me, I got to tell you, now's the time when we can decide to go home.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was a good, it felt real to me. It felt like a real and genuine thing. Not like, we don't have to have a fight. There doesn't have to be like whatever. Also, Ellie had woken up Dina, so she was tired in that moment, right? So
I think it would have been effective too, had not Jesse and Ellie had to go get Tommy, and then that ended up being Ellie discovering where Abby was hiding. I think then if not for that, they would have gone home, turned around and called it, gone back to Jackson, maybe regrouped, figure something else out. But like in that moment where Ellie told Dina that whole backstory about what happens in Salt Lake City, if I were Dina, I would have told Ellie, that you're not personally responsible for what Joel did in her name. That's on Joel, not on you. You shouldn't have to carry that responsibility. It would have been nice to have...
That's a valid thing to say to somebody, for sure.
Dina...
I think that's a valid thing.
Right. I think...
If she had the presence of mind
to
say such a thing, but at the same time, shot in the leg, pregnant,
sure. If I were...
I mean, she didn't take an arrow to the knee, so, she could have... She's been pretty good about saying the right words.
Is this a Skyrim reference, Tosin?
Yes, I think so.
But yeah, no, if I were Dina, I would have given Ellie a little bit of grace and said, hey, this is not... You don't have to carry the burden of Joel's actions on your shoulder.
Nah, she's like, bitch, I don't give a fuck. Let's go home. And I think, so for me, like, the thing that made it so real is Dina's like, dude, I love you. Let's go home. Like, let's just go home. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Joel killed a lot of people. And, you didn't get Abby, but I mean, she's already, at this point, she's taken out a few people, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she at least took out Nora.
Yeah.
She took out Nora. The other two weren't dead yet, Owen and Mel. I mean, but you got one of them. You sent a message, and I want them. And also remember, Dina's like, at first she's like, I want them to die, and if you're gonna do this, I'm here with you. But what she's seeing in Ellie's face, in many respects, is hesitation, is a lack of wanting to continue the killing.
Yeah.
And at that point, if you're Dina and you know your girl's heart, you're like, okay, let's go home. We don't have to do this. Remember, she said, if you want to do this, I'll do this with you. And now she's like, I don't know that I want to do this. And she's like, okay, let's go home.
Things are a lot more complicated now with the shot in the leg, and and
the freaking Seraphites stringing people up and disemboweling them.
Yes, and also
that was not on the map when they
like
when Dina got shot in the leg. It was right after they saw the Seraphites disembowel WLF member, and that was just not on the map. The idea was to go in surgically, take out some people, and leave. And now they're caught in the middle of a war, which is exactly why Jesse's like, this is not our war.
I thought it was interesting when Ellie and Jesse are walking back to go find Tommy, that Jesse basically takes down Ellie's he reveals her carelessness by telling her that he was able to find her through tactical reasoning, through induction. Like, I was able to figure this out, and I did it. This is how I did it. And all of that
took him a couple days, though.
Yeah,
it was worth saying that it took him a couple days, and also he's looking for her.
Yes. Right? But
it also gave us foundation.
But that also means that she's not trying hard enough not to be found.
That's true, and that what he did gave the story foundation, so that when Abby shows up in the theater, you're not like, how the heck could she have found them in the theater?
Exactly.
Right. So the reason he's telling her that is so that when it's like almost like it's a sort of like it's like a narrative Chekhov's gun. You're easy to find. Abby found you.
Right.
That kind of thing. So
you're not being careful enough, which has been what we've been.
She's reckless.
Yes. That's been the underscore of who Ellie is being characterized as for this entire season.
Ellie's working on herself.
Yes. and Shimmer is still alive. So
thank God. Come on, people. Shimmer's fine. Not that you did anything to him, but let Shimmer stay fine, right? And that's like part of like what Jesse's about. He's like, look, you didn't take care to hide yourself properly. You're running around doing all this crap. And you even left. I mean, we found the horse, and the horse is luckily fine. But come on.
Yeah, I knew you'd be happy there.
I'm so happy.
Kept the horse alive in this version.
In this version, don't go.
And it's pretty gruesome if you ever played the game.
So like in storytelling, whether it's the Lord of the Rings going through Khazad-dûm and those gigantic stairs falling so no one else could ever find them, or the horse getting, totally ripped apart or whatever, the point is you're at a point of no return. You cannot go back. You are on your way out. And I feel like with Jesse saying the horse is fine, it's like, the horse is fine. Let's go now. And I'm definitely, I'm down with Jesse and Dina being like, let's go. We got to go home. And if you've seen Inglourious Bastards, you know that the story doesn't always have to go the way you've been told it's going to go.
Right.
So part of me is constantly hoping that they just change the plot.
That they all go back to Jackson and everyone is okay. And Jesse's fine. Yeah, Jesse lives.
It's like every time I watch Romeo and Juliet as a play, or even the one of the many movies,
right?
I'm just hoping that like it's gonna change.
They run away together.
Right. They elope and they're fine. They're gonna be fine. I can stop watching it before the fifth act.
Right. What's the deal with this bracelet that Dina gives Ellie?
Oh, that's right. It's a Hamza bracelet. It's known as the Hand of Fatima or the Hand of Miriam. It's a symbol of protection and good fortune in both Jewish culture, Jewish faith, and Islamic culture. And some of them also believe that some people believe that the Hamza also brings blessings and fertility to a believer's life. So if you are a devoted Jewish person or Islamic person or Christian, keeping the bracelet, which is kind of like an amulet near your body, will help you receive God's love at all times and all those things. So she's basically giving it to her as an offering of love, right? So regardless of the conversation we had upstairs, let's go home, whatever, you guys are going out. I'm in front of Jesse, who's a witness. I'm giving you this bracelet that matters to me because you matter to me. Also come back to me, right? So I think all of that is wrapped in to that giving. And you don't have to know what a Hamza bracelet is to understand that when she takes off her jewelry and she gives it to her lover, girlfriend, partner, whatever you want to call her, she's making a gesture to say, I want you to come back safely, come back to me, that kind of thing. I can't go with you. But, do what you gotta do and then come on back because I need you. I want you to be part of my life. And I think that's important after the conversation that they had upstairs where it's like, Joel, death, Salt Lake City, that's why we're here. And she's like, let's go home. And I think if you're Ellie, just like you guys, you don't quite know where Ellie stood with Dina at that moment when Dina's like, let's go home. Right. So I think Dina is reassuring her that I'm still with you by giving her the bracelet. That's kind of how I took it.
Yeah, no, I didn't even really clock that bracelet much at all, but that's interesting.
I've been eyeing everything Dina's been wearing the entire season. I've seen you, girl. You got style.
I like that in that scene in the library where Jesse recognizes.
It's a bookstore, by the way.
What's that?
I think it's a bookstore.
Bookstore. Yeah, you're right. She recognizes the love that Ellie feels for Dina because he has experienced it before. But the point of the story he's relating to Ellie is that he understood his responsibility to the greater community, and that responsibility is greater than his own individual needs. I
mean, part of that's just because he made sure that she understands he was raised by that community. Right. They're all kind of like, between 19 and 24. So they've all basically been in the apocalypse their entire cognizant lives. Right. So he might have been a toddler when it all happened, but somehow they protected him and cared. And that also makes sense because during the very beginning of things, the hardest people to keep alive would have been infants, newborns, all that stuff. He's like, I owe it to the community. I couldn't just leave the community for some girl that I liked, that I was really into. And she couldn't just leave her family. And, he doesn't even know if she's alive or dead, what happened to her, whatever. But in that moment, you do get another one of those false hopes that maybe Jesse goes back to Wyoming and finds his love. I'm like, oh, yeah, Jesse. Also, they're doing a lot of work to make sure that the love triangle of Jesse, Dina, and Ellie is not going to become melodrama, right?
Sure.
Like it's dramatic already. It's kind of like the Titanic movie when the boat is sinking, but still there's a gunfight. You don't need the gunfight.
Right.
Like the situation is dramatic enough with.
It's the point of a gunfight on a sinking ship.
Exactly. You don't need the melodrama of Jesse being the angry, jilted ex while Dina and Ellie are excited about raising his biological child. All that stuff. You don't need it. It's not necessary to the plot, and it's not great for the characters. What the characters are going through is this kind of like focused idea of how they fit in with one another, and Ellie is the only one uncertain. Dina has love for Jesse, but she's not in love with Jesse anymore. Jesse feels the same way about Dina, and they both share that about this kid that Dina's going to have. I think it's interesting how Jesse, it was like, I don't really love Dina the way you did. I just got her knocked out, because like it's the apocalypse and you're going to hook up if you have a chance.
Right.
But I do think that Ellie didn't quite understand that because, again, she does feel so much younger than anyone else, even though she's about the same age as Dina.
She wasn't raised in the same way, in the same communal experience as the rest of Jackson.
She was a property of the Fireflies, effectively.
Right.
Like, she was living under Fegdra and property of the Fireflies. They absconded her out so that they could use her DNA or whatever to make a cure for everybody. And that was like the entire purpose of the Fireflies for a minute. And that's like her, so she wasn't given the sort of love that Jesse and Dina seemed to have come up with. Instead, she had a Joel who would protect her, but was going through his own shit. So he wasn't able to sort of like, it was only at the end, the last 5 years, that he was really able to dote on her and give her that love, and she still doesn't know how to handle it.
So for Jesse, it is valid that his point to Ellie, that everything you do for you. You're self motivated and don't often think about the larger community. Because that was Ellie's experience.
Yeah, she's like, I gotta live. Joel didn't save me so that I could not live. And then there's also just the fact that whether it's I'm going to get these sneakers, I traded my boots for these sneakers or whatever.
Right.
She's not a person who thinks forward all the time. And when you don't think forward all the time, you tend to make the kinds of choices that are about the moment. If they're about the moment, they're about you in the moment, right?
Yes.
So there's all that. Like, even now, going to Seattle was not about the community. It was about her.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Jesse was like,
right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But for whatever reason, Jesse had to sneak away. That's interesting.
Yeah, so when we have the storm that's brewing, it's really interesting to me because we see Ellie get swallowed by a whale or
a wave.
And actually a wave. Which is the whale.
But yeah, there's this biblical imagery of Jonah and the whale. I get you, man.
Yep. So curious what your thoughts were on that whole storm.
I mean, the storm itself, like there's the Moana aspect of the storm where the lightning is showing. There's no light. Right. She doesn't have like a spotlight or anything. So the lightning is showing her where the wheel is. So she's wayfinding by lightning. And you're just like, okay. And you wonder if she's going to start breaking out in song. And there's just like the huge set piece of it all. But at the same time, I don't really know how necessary all that was. Just the using the boat to get there. I just don't know how necessary all that was. But I'm glad the storm was there. Yeah. I'm glad that it kind of showed us a fog of war, because nothing is possible. Sure. In the last episode, they're sneaking through the town. They come out. There's a spotlight on them, all that stuff. In the case of the storm, there's all these things going for them. One thing that's going for them is the WLF is going over to Bainbridge Island. So their numbers are not in force on the Seattle area and like actual Seattle. Bainbridge Island is not in the city of Seattle. It's across Elliott Bay from them. And then second, because of the lightning, because of whatever, she could go in under the cover of the storm, right? So even if Abby's like people were like kind of on the lookout, it's hard to see someone coming in the storm. When she's climbing up the various parts of the aquarium to get in, I mean, she's making a racket. She's groaning. Yeah. She's like, and as a concerned watcher, you're like, Ellie, shut up. You don't need to make a lot of noise. But it's Hollywood, so they gotta make all the noise. But it's only plausible because the storm is raging. So
sure.
I think the storm was her friend. Like the ocean chose her.
Just like Moana.
Exactly.
Yeah, I do think that it was a bit overindulgent. Like, I understand
Plot armor.
You have the stuff of the storm in the game, as another sort of means of travel and as of showing sort of the breakup of the dynamic of Jesse and Ellie. But I think part of them kind of getting on the island and stuff was just a little bit. It wasn't necessarily how things happen in the game, and I know they want to just expose you to more elements there, but I don't know. It didn't work as well.
A lot
for
of
me.
stuff in this episode in general, like between
you get into this part. Yeah, that's right.
Between the stuff with Mel and Owen's planning, which we saw part of that Ellie walks into, the WLF's leaving Seattle and going to wherever they're going to go to, and then the Seraphite village exploding. I feel like we're getting a lot of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern moments that are setting up for the other half of this story next season, which is fine, but for me,
not at the expense of the season.
Yeah, it contributes to making this particular episode that we're watching feel less than complete. And
yeah, I mean, what did you really get out of Ellie almost getting hung?
Yeah, like in the game, Ellie doesn't actually get strung up. Hung.
Yeah,
and technically she's also the one who gets shot with the arrow, not Dina. So right. I think those elements. I understand shooting Dina, so the baby scene is a bit more powerful. Just having one baby versus two baby scenes,
Yes.
But yeah, I just don't know. I mean, on one hand, Ellie also has that conversation with Jesse where she's like, "Hey, I'm not like you. Like right. Kind of to your points where you're like, oh, she's just doing things for her own self and not necessarily for the whole own." But maybe she is actually, even though she says she's not like Jesse, maybe she actually is. She does have remorse. She was trying to, think. Sometimes she does think about others, and ultimately she does recognize that Jesse is a good person. She says it.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Saint Jesse.
I think that there's they both have good points, and obviously they both have different perspectives on this. So I don't think that either of them is like black and white right.
Totally.
But also Ellie is young and she's hyper focused and she's got bloodlust on her mind. So it is clouding her judgment.
Yeah. She's very much like Romeo after Mercutio's death right now.
Right.
She's just totally like on the warpath. But it is, I do think, getting back to this episode's structure, that scene where the boat gets blasted all the way over to Bainbridge Island, but somehow not where the boats of the WLF have gone. And, while she gets tossed out of the boat, she swims, she gets to the island shore, and the boat just, nicely like rolls up on the island shore. So she can have this like 5-minute almost death moment. And then somehow not even like process that when going over to kill Abby. That scene, if they had cut out that entire scene and used the time more effectively, maybe next season show us what's going on with Isaac and the whole WLF situation with Abby and how she didn't want to go, whatever. I think the episode would have been much, much better for it.
Yeah, I can't say I disagree with you. A couple other things I wanted to bring up. The technique of Ellie asking Mel and Owen to draw Abby's location on a map separately. It was a technique that Joel used last season, and when he caught those guys from the cannibal camp and wanted to know where the location of the camp was. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see that nice little callback
tricks.
Yeah. Jumping forward to the very end of before this day one flashback, the confrontation with Abby and Ellie. I noticed Abby had rope marks on her neck. So somewhere along her exploits in some backstory, which I'm sure we'll see in the next season, she escaped a hanging as well. Probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's another visual indication that, you know, Abby, like the through the looking glass thing, Alice in Wonderland, Abby and Ellie have so much in common. Yeah.
And the last thing is, one of the things I really did not like about this episode was you have this scenario where Abby is pointing a gun directly at Ellie, and then you cut to black and you hear a gunshot. And I really hate...
It's like the end of The Sopranos. It's great.
There was no
what
gunshot at the end.
Have a problem with that? Yeah.
But I really hate moments like that because they imply either one of two things. Either Abby killed our protagonist, which we know can't be true, or that the seed is a cop-out and it's manipulating the audience, which... I
mean, it sounds like it was both right then.
Yeah, I wish they would have done it in a different way, no matter what the outcome is, because I know that Abby did not shoot Ellie. That one thing I do know.
Or if she shot her, it didn't kill her.
I don't know.
But the thing is, the gun was so close. Yeah. Like, how could you not kill her?
Yes. What they should have done was cut to, in the very next scene, you hear this metal door slamming open from the flashback scene where Abby is lying on the couch asleep. That would have been delivered the same effect, misdirecting the audience, but from it would have come from the audience's assumption rather than...
Andy, they should hire you as a director.
Or an editor, at least. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. I gotta agree. That would have been awesome if it faded to black. It went directly to black, Buffy style, and then you saw the door kind of like coming back from being banged against the wall. It would have been fantastic. I think we would have been like, oh, there'd been like a big sigh of relief and a little confusion. And frankly, in a lot of these shows, I mean, in a good story, you want a little bit of confusion from the audience,
right? And
ambiguity. And we would have had to like deal with the fact that Abby was at the Soundview Stadium, and like we don't know what happened. That kind of thing.
Well, I mean, she might have shot or killed her. We don't know for sure, but
that's ambiguity. I say is necessary. Like we shouldn't know necessarily what happened, but the fact that the door is open, literally in Andy's scenario. To that just being the banging of a door as someone's like, hey, get up, Isaac wants to talk to you, that like leaves enough ambiguity for you not to like dwell on the silliness of the idea that Abby shot Ellie in the face or something. Because it's a silly idea.
I mean, I don't think that she was that close, but in either case, that is kind of how the game does it, right? So there's been quite and not to say that they couldn't have changed it. They easily could have changed. They've changed a lot of things here, but in several instances, especially in some of their big instances, they are truthful to the game. So
I mean, even Abby walking out to the front, the main arena of Soundview Stadium, where the camera's on her back and we see her shoulders moving back and forth. I mean, that is clearly taken from the third person view of the game. Absolutely. But I don't know. I just feel like, we talked about this a little bit before the show. It became clear that there's going to be a third season. That became clear. So it's not like, and Joel's gone. So unless the whole story was going to be like, Abby shot Ellie, and now we're going to follow Abby because it's a Doctor Who like change protagonists every season. That's not going to work, right? Like, so. And I know, Ned got his head cut off in episode 9. I get it. But at the same time, I just don't feel like that. It was like the worst of Westworld, where it's not possible for this trick to have played out properly and have the audience believe it.
All right, let's talk about some of the big picture stuff. Since we've covered the entire season, second season, let's talk about like where this season has taken us on our plot and character journeys, some of the major themes going on here, just cover some of the big picture stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like, you wanted to talk about this moment where Ellie confronts. Everyone's name ends with E. It's very confusing to me.
Abby, Ellie.
Andy, where Ellie confronts Mel and Owen in the aquarium looking for Abby.
Yeah.
And Owen is pretty nihilistic. She's just gonna kill us anyway. And she's like, no, I won't. Go into that, Andy.
Yes. Ellie insists, I'm not gonna do that because I'm not like you. Every hero thinks that they're better than they have a greater morals than their adversary. But as we see almost immediately in the very same scene, that it happened. Accidents happen, and Ellie obviously did not intend to kill a pregnant woman and her child, but it just happened. And it's that I think that the showrunners are interrogating that idea of tribal war, where it's like, where does it end? Where do you draw the line and walk away from conflict if you were constantly
there was
fighting?
No way for her to walk away from that conflict right then, right?
Right. But I mean,
I hear what you're saying. She inadvertently, killed the lady, and like killed Mel, and her fetus was, pretty much like a week from coming out, and the fetus died too. But I do think that she's like, I'm not like you, because she didn't intend to wipe them out. But when Owen grabs that gun and he basically doesn't even give what she's trying to do a chance, then she has to take him out. And she's got, I think that's Joel's revolver that she's using. It's worth noting that revolver is effectively a hand cannon compared to like a 9mm or whatever. And so there's the use of the choice of the revolver as the gun she uses from that one side of her, that one leg over the other leg, is that, that bullet is going to go through his neck, and then it's going to keep on going. And we saw that it went through the neck. It grazed Mel's, it went through his throat, grazed Mel's neck, and then it still went into the cabinet behind, and the hole was gigantic.
Yeah.
Right. So, she's like, I'm not like you because I'm not trying to like, kill you both. But if you're I'm also not gonna stand here and die. So,
right.
Some people could say that Mel's death was on Owen, not on Ellie.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the game it's a bit different. Owen, she essentially has them both separated, wants them both to point at the map. Owen starts a struggle. She ends up killing Owen.
And Owen is huge. This is another indication that like Ellie is super strong, or like she's super virulent, because Owen is humongous.
Right. I believe she kill him with a knife. She kills one of them with a knife.
Yeah.
And then she ends up, and then Mel comes in and tries to, and like struggles with her and gets, killed as well too. And then Ellie recognizes that she's pregnant.
Right.
So it wasn't until after, so
in both cases, it was unintentional in terms of the taking out the pregnant person. And we're still not clear that what Ellie really wanted was to kill them. She really just wanted information.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it's unclear in both scenarios that her goal was to get the information and assassinate them. Dina would have killed them, no doubt.
And then, unlike Joel, who would have sort of lied about what happened or maybe changed it a little bit, Ellie did not. And one thing that I think one of the more powerful scenes in that thing was the pause of Jesse just looking at the dead pregnant woman and probably having thoughts of his own
baby mama.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, she stopped. Like that whole thing. If she were super hardcore, right? If she were super like, I'm all about getting to Abby, the first thing she would have done after Mel died was hop back on that table and look for any clue she could find regarding Abby's whereabouts. But I think in keeping with what she said, I'm not like you, I'm not trying to kill you both, she felt that remorse again. And in the case of Nora, she didn't actually kill Nora. Nora was already on her way out. Nora was going to turn infected because of the spores. In this case, it was her hand that dealt the death blow. And it's not like it's the first person she killed. They talked about that before while they were traveling to Seattle. But it was sort of like in this moment where she wasn't trying to kill people.
Right.
And certainly once she realizes that Mel was pregnant, the gravity of what she did, I think, does show that she's not like them. And she's not like Joel, like you just said, Tosin. Like Gail said, that she's carrying her own burden. And that burden, it seems like she's interested in lightening it just a little bit.
It was a wake-up call. That she crossed a line.
Expensive one.
Across the moral line that she was not expecting that she would cross. And it means I think it's the first time that Ellie realizes that, hey, I could very well be the monster at the end of this book, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's really key. It's really key.
And so, I mean, I'm interested to see where that
fetus died too. I mean, how do you guys feel about that? Like, do you think?
I mean, obviously,
it would have been the move to cut her open and pull out a baby. I mean, Mel certainly wanted it.
But yes, but Ellie was
possible mother's dying wish.
That she didn't have the. It wasn't like that she didn't have the will to do it. It's just she was not. She
wasn't capable.
She didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express the prior night.
Right, well,
she was not capable
on multiple ways. So on the one hand, Mel's like, yeah, you just dig the knife in and pull it out, because I think if you live in that world, you're like, look, there might be a time when we have to have a C-section.
Right.
Who knows, right? If you're pregnant, but also, the idea that 19-year-old Ellie knows anything about getting a baby out there, and if the baby even came out, what's she gonna do? Breastfeed it?
Exactly.
So that was nuts. But you want to talk a little bit about, Andy, about the part where as Mel died and her senses failed.
Just that moment where Mel is lying there and her body her spirit is going away, but
her blood's running out.
Yes, but at the same time she's encouraging Ellie because she is not aware that she is not giving her a C-section. All she can do is continue to encourage her. And to hear her encouraging Ellie on as she's dying, in her dying breath, was such a heartbreaking scene. It's for me, like one of the more heartbreaking scenes in this season.
It was pretty messed up. It's also messed up with the context that Ellie herself was born from a dying mother.
That's right.
She couldn't return the favor.
I didn't even think about that. That's pretty astute. I didn't even think about that. So many parallels here with pregnancy, with Dina's pregnancy, with Mel, with Ellie's own mother. So many parallels with life or death at the point of pregnancy. And I feel like
pregnancy is incredibly dangerous on its own. You don't have to add gunfire to it.
Right.
So, but she was prepared.
Or zombies.
Yeah, she was totally prepared to be disemboweled, which is a thing that the Seraphites do to the people they don't like. She was totally prepared for that in order to have her fetus take its first breath, even as she took her last. And that is the kind of hit emotionally that I feel like the show is getting right. That the game didn't have the presence of mind to do. It's not that the game is bad or anything. I love the game, but that was a moment that will stay with people, I think.
Yeah, well, you have to fulfill a certain purview in a game, and
you got to keep it moving, all that stuff.
Right, but also, like, once the game is over and you've had a time to think about it and reevaluate it and synthesize the narrative down to what is crucial, it gives you the opportunity to do that in a show like this.
Absolutely. So another sort of big picture idea that we're that we've talked a bunch about is this sort of justification of who is good, who is bad, who's in the wrong, or who's in the right. And that, ultimately leads, and even in that conflict where we just had with the shooting of Mel and killing the baby, right? And as you kind of put there, Dwayne, Owen was to be blamed as well too. So it's like there's this sort of duality of what you're trying to get, and I think ultimately that leads us into this discussion of human nature and community. All right, we had Jesse earlier on in the episode saying this is not our war as justification for not helping the kid, and so I think there's this pull and push between how you define community, right? Is it what's best for yourself and those who you love? And what is that sphere of community? Is it just people in general, in the general world as it is? And I think a lot of that also leads into conflict, this avenue of, whose community is better than others and who should lead.
There's an us versus them, right? That's like a big piece. I mean, community is about forming an us out of a bunch of yous, right? Or yous or I's. And I think there's a huge disagreement between Jesse and Ellie about community. And I don't know that Ellie actually has her finger on a definition of community, right? She calls Joel her community at one point.
Right.
And then she's later on is like, yeah, you're my family, which means definitely you're in my community.
Yeah.
But when she's interested in chasing down the WLF members to save the Seraphite youngster, it seems as if the community she's tying herself to, if we could use that word, is very much about protecting the weak from the strong.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Despite the fact that she doesn't quite understand what the Seraphites are.
Right.
Right. When a little boy later on that same day gives the order to kill her, she might have a different perspective, if she had it all over to do again. But yeah, I think you're right, Tosin, that there's this idea of community is not really well defined from Ellie's perspective, but other people seem to have a very good definition. Obviously, the Seraphites do. It's their religious people, right? They're people. The WLF do. They're an army. Jesse does. Jackson's his community. But Ellie was with a lone wolf, right? Lone wolf and cub.
Yeah.
And so they were the community. And now they're not.
But also, like, for as mercenary as we've seen Ellie become, I feel like she has a distorted, maybe a not well formed idea about the nature of people, morally the nature of people. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is like in Ellie's world, she would believe that that like Joel, like if you do something good for somebody, if you save somebody's life, like Abby, then the result is that they will be appreciative and not harm you. And Ellie got to see firsthand that that's not the case, that Abby despite the fact that Joel saved Abby's life from
did she know that? Did she know that?
Well, she saw that brutality, but also, Ellie believes that in rescuing this Seraphite from the WLF members, this teen Seraphite, that this is something that is a good thing and that would be appreciated. However, as you mentioned in the very same episode, we see that that other youth Seraphites are would kill her at the drop of a hat without thinking twice about it.
Without even knowing that she's not WLF. I mean,
exactly.
He just assumes she's WLF, and he's like, she should die, but not, because basically, like, because you're not us, you need to know her love,
yes.
And by knowing her love, I mean screwing you up and disassembling you. Right.
Well, the Seraphites are completely different. Their own ideology, I feel like, blinds them to moral moral factions of good and bad.
Right. Their ideology goes before reality.
Yes.
And that is part of what's so disturbing about them.
Yes. Yes.
The WLF seem to shoot first and ask questions later. So they're also very disturbing. Ellie is a wild card. Whereas,
right.
When you look at Dina and Jesse, their motivations, and kind of this is an NPC thing, their motivations are more clear. And Dina, and when you're a playable character, you have to be a wild card. The person playing Ellie at any given time is gonna want to use multiple options. Now the game has cutscenes and things have to happen in order for it to move forward and all this stuff, but at the same time, wild card is part of this thing. You see it in Fallout 2. The main character there also a wild card. You never know what she's gonna do because she kind of represents this playable character. Right.
Let's talk about Isaac and Abby and their dynamic.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. Isaac again said that what they have there is a whole bunch of sheep in wolves' clothing, and he was looking very much forward to Abby, being effectively third in line. He's like, look, obviously, Park, if something happens to me, I expect you to run the troops. You have the experience, whatever. But then also, Abby shows this independence thing, and we don't know exactly what happened to Abby and Isaac, but we do know that for whatever reason, despite being part of the WLF and being one of Isaac's favorites, she's got a noose mark around her neck.
Yeah.
So something went wrong. And if you know anything about the game, you know that things are grayer than just WLF and Seraphite, but for whatever reason in the show, she's not with him. She's AWOL, and she's AWOL during this big operation to the point where he's like, hey, I want her to be around. And Park is like, well, she's not around. We got to go.
Yeah.
You got faith in her, but clearly it's not worth spending faith on her because she's not here when you need her. So we know that in the last, and because we know during day one of Seattle, she was very much in the center of all the action with the WLF. We know that something has happened between day one and day three in Abby's life to make it so she's AWOL with the WLF, and that's a pretty big thing. Also, we've got this issue with the future, and I don't know if we want to talk a little bit more about WLF Seraphite conflict.
I just want to say in general that the Seraphites right now feel a little superfluous for me. It's like a convoluted factor to complicate this narrative, and I don't know, unless there's more of a substantial payoff to them in the next season, which I'm not aware of, or what greater picture they have in the video game, which I have not played. Right now, the Seraphites and the conflict between the WLF and the Seraphites both seem a little convoluted.
I can say that the show has elevated the Seraphites a bit. I think Tosin might agree with that. The Seraphites, first of all, the children are dangerous. We see them doing things like, advocating that Ellie die. They're considered dangerous to the WLF. They kill them on sight. The idea is extermination of the Seraphites. And it seems like the Seraphites are exterminating WLF whenever they can. They're also are able to do it without the aids of modern technology, whether it's because they simply don't have it or what the show depicts is more that they're not interested in it. I would also say that the WLF and the Seraphite conflict sort of represents this overarching situation that allows our characters to sort of be able to look out from the outside and reflect upon, right? Now, our characters may not live through being in the crossfire, but as viewers, we get to see that while Jackson has its problems, it's nothing like what's going on in the Puget Sound, right? And I think that gives you perspective as to sort of, especially because this season, there's been a lot less zombie violence and a lot more human on human violence, which is part of the trope that happens with post-apocalyptic fiction, especially zombie fiction.
Right.
But it's like organized human versus human violence, like highly organized warfare, which takes up a lot of energy, right? It's like when you watch Furiosa and you're like, they had a whole war in the desert with sticks. And it's very much, I don't know, I just feel like it's this situation between the Seraphite and the WLF. It's less convoluted and more about domination and clash of different civilizations, kind of. And I think Ellie and Dina and Jesse and Tommy are kind of like, we got to go home. Our only problem is the infected, really.
Right.
You know?
Right. We have it easy.
Yeah, I mean, the WLF are the whole thing is like, why one group hasn't left the area is crazy to me.
Right. Let's talk about the future, like the impact of what our characters have done on everyone's future.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't very long, but it's pretty important. When Ellie shot Mel dead and left her fetus to die inside of her, she killed part of the WLF's future, which we know is uncertain, based on A, Abby leaving, and B, the fact that the Seraphites claim that they can keep on converting WLF members. Meanwhile, Abby shoots Jesse in the face and he's dead. She killed a huge part of Jackson Hole community future, because Jesse it's been brought up time and time again that Jesse is the future of Jackson Hole,
right,
in terms of its leadership. And then when you think about that, Isaac and Tommy both had successors. For Isaac, that successor was Abby, but she's left him. And for Tommy, that successor was Jesse, but he's dead. So the future is completely out of balance going into the third season. Whether it's the youth, like the next generation, all of it's very fatalist. And it seems like all of these conflicts could have been avoided, but there's no room for negotiation. It's all been snowballing. And so there's nothing to stop it. It's kind of nuts.
I've got some unanswered questions about this episode and about the season moving forward. Actually, we'll start with you. Like, give us a unanswered question that you have for this.
I mean, I get the Costco reference; it's cool and everything like that. But they have buildings everywhere. Why were they at a Costco? It's a stupid question.
You know,
like,
it's the $5 rotisserie chicken.
Tent? Yeah, probably. Like, why do you need the tent and all that stuff when you've got like fortified buildings? And I know some of them are collapsing, but it seemed a little. It seemed like a little extra, like the whole, like some of the other stuff we talked about this episode, but whatever. Andy, you had a question about the prophets?
Yeah. So I want to know why is there more than one Seraphite prophet that we've seen graffitied on the wall? Like I
don't think there's more than one. I think there's a single one, and I think that it's a she, and everybody knows it's a she.
Well, it's one with different faces.
Over time, or for whatever reason, she's depicted differently. So maybe people have heard about her in hindsight. Not in hindsight. Yeah, in hindsight. They've heard about her. They've heard about her works, and they've depicted her based on what they heard. But there's no cameras, really, right? So, like, who or what she looked like matters less than what she did. We see this in our own mythologies, right? We see this in our own religions.
Sure.
Jesus Christ was almost certainly a person from the Middle East, and we depict him sometimes as a blonde person, right? It's because the people who worshipped him in Europe were like, he's idealized from our perspective of idealized, right?
Right.
Not from the perspective of history's whatever. We've idealized him, and he's going to be this hair color and these eyes and all these things, even though he may not have been any of those things. So I think it's important to sort of recognize that this, it kind of gives the faith of the Seraphites a gravitas that she's depicted in so many different ways. To
me, that just reopens up the concept that Ellie could be the prophet. If they don't know what the prophet looks like, and they just have this legend of who that is, maybe it is Ellie. Maybe it's Abby. or
maybe just the way it functions in the world, that even when people do actually see the prophet, they still don't believe.
Yes.
And they crucify them either way.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it was with Christ over there.
Yeah.
Crucified despite everyone knowing he was the prophet. So, yeah, absolutely.
I've got a question. A plot hole for me in this episode is that when Captain Park has the meeting with Isaac, and she asks him, why Abby? What's the significance? Why her? I mean, they've all traveled in the same circles. They're all about the same. They've all had the same experiences. So wouldn't that be apparent to Park? Why?
I got an answer for this, and I think it has to do with last episode when we first met Park.
Yeah.
So she's manning the hospital. She's got her team in the hospital. She's doing her patrols around the hospital. Isaac runs the whole shebang, and it's like a different series of units, So yes, there's probably lots of close proximity and all that stuff. But at the same time, I think, for Park, speaking of the future, her son was the future. He was one of their best. And he said, lock us up. We're going to die down here. And so she wasn't really focused on other people. She was focused on her kid being the best WLF person he could be. And now he's gone. So her perspective is opened up a little bit, or maybe not. And so she's like, who? Abby who? Abby what? And so that's the thing.
Tosin, how about you? Have any questions?
Yeah, this is more of a question for you guys. At the end of the episode, when they discuss a bit of the making of Bella Ramsey, the actor who plays Ellie, says that she doesn't believe that Ellie is doing a better job than Joel, similar to how Joel said, I wish you'd be better than I was.
Do a little bit better than I, yeah.
What do you guys think? Do you think she's right here, or?
I mean, I try to avoid that the way Andy avoids the game, but I will say that she could be trying to do better and not achieving that. I think that's pretty clear. When you shoot someone through the neck and kill a pregnant lady, you're not doing better than Joel, but she wanted to. So I think both things can be true at once.
I think Ellie as a character is still a bit immature and still has a lot to learn. And so
I think a bit is an understatement.
Is not quite at the place where Joel was as a surrogate parent.
Yeah, I mean, Joel was in his, he's 55. So back in 20 years ago, he was 35 and he had like a 14 or 15-year-old daughter. So he had the girl when he was in his early 20s. Ellie is nowhere, and Ellie's in her early 20s and she's theoretically having a kid, but she just doesn't seem anywhere near where he would have been raising Sarah. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is one of those things that you hear, especially immigrant parents like mine, like, oh, at your age, I was doing X, Y, Z, ABC. And I feel like that's definitely how I feel about Ellie trying to be the grown-up that Joel was at this point. So, yeah, she's immature.
Well, let's talk about some of the technical aspects where we talk about some of the behind-the-scenes elements we enjoyed in this episode. Acting, visual effects, music, etc. Now, I do watch that behind the scenes stuff after the show, and I noticed in this episode in particular, they had like half a dozen different ways that they were covering this, making this storm a reality, like realizing the storm. There was set elements, there was at location elements. It was pretty impressive.
They spent a lot of energy on the storm. Like there's boats with blue screens. Like clearly she wasn't actually underneath a real wave. There's insurance to worry about. But they put so much energy into the storm, and I think on some level it's because like they're in Seattle. It's Washington. I mean, not Washington. Wyoming is landlocked. Seattle is not. The water is so important to what's going on, and so they wanted to add those elements in. And I gotta say, I don't know how necessary it was, but I respect the effort. I was convinced.
They did their homework, in other words.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was pretty big. I think it's worth saying, we can like hop onto this geography now. There's this moment when, you know, Abby first sees the Wonder Wheel,
Right.
the Great Wheel in Seattle. And I live with a Seattleite, and we were trying to figure out what was going on geographically. It seems that they went through all that they need to go through to make this work. Now, the hospital doesn't exist in real Seattle, but they seem to be at the Elliott Bay Trail when they looked up to see the Great Wheel. And also, the Elliott Bay Trail has a couple little docks on it, which explains why the boats headed that way and hopped on those docks. Then you go across Elliott Bay, that body of water, and you get to Bainbridge Island. And obviously, if you're the Seraphites, an island makes a lot of sense. Now, they were randomly in a park before, so how the group in the park is related to the group at the island, I don't know. But the reason why all this is so interesting is because Elliott Bay Trail, where that dock was, is also right around where they would have heard those radio calls about the sniper at Lake Union, South Lake Union, right? South Lake Union is an area. It's kind of where Amazon is in Seattle and stuff like that. But it does have tall enough buildings where a sniper could really sit out and do their work. And the idea that they were, you know, Jesse left to go catch up with Tommy at Lake Union is brilliant, because then you have them going in opposite directions. Now, Ellie could have overlanded it to the Great Wheel, but by going on the ocean, she avoids, like, you know, clickers and other things in addition to any WLF patrol. So she went in the water. The idea that the water was able to push Ellie all the way to Bainbridge Island is nuts, but it is a TV show. And I think that's
right.
It's worth saying.
Right.
But yeah, it's I mean, if you go on Apple Maps or Google Maps, you can totally see a layout of the entire scenario, and it does give you a lot of detail, right? When it comes to understanding how the various characters were moving. I couldn't tell you exactly where the theater was, but my guess is that it's south of, I mean, it's north of the whole Elliott Bay Trail where Ellie and Jesse parted ways. It's probably in like Queen Anne or West Queen Anne. And the WLF is probably hanging out mostly closer to South Lake Union, where they have these kinds of resources, but they're also at the stadium too, right? So that's worth saying. So yeah, it was just all very interesting how they laid it out and how they made it feel real to someone who's actually from Seattle, like my wife.
Any other interesting things you wanted to bring up? Differences between the game and the show?
The big things are, you know, Abby's a big fan of marine biology, aquarium stuff, in the same way that Ellie's a big fan of space. So it makes sense that we meet her there and from the game.
Yeah.
In the game, there are no Seraphite kids. You can't just sort of kill kids in a video game yet. So the show gives the Seraphites more context. We see dead kids. In the case of this episode, kids ordering the deaths of people.
Yeah.
Still, we don't see people hanging kids or gunning them down. So there's still some taboos around children, which is a good thing, I think. But the Seraphite children have really shown up in this version of The Last of Us, and it's an interesting choice that they've made.
I'm curious to see what the dynamic is with the Seraphites and their children, since we already know the dynamic with the WLF and their hope for the next generation. And
I mean, they gave the girl a hammer or whatever, right? First episode we saw with them,
right? And Dina and Abby and Dina and Ellie and their hope for the next generation. So I'm curious to see what the dynamic is of the Seraphites and what they believe the leading for the future is for them.
Sure.
And the last thing is ephemera, links and exotextual connections that will help you enhance your enjoyment of this episode. We discussed earlier in the episode the monster at the end of this book, the Sesame
It's a
Street.
little golden book, so it's like $4 or $5.
It's a classic.
If you have a little kid, definitely check it out. It's like a lot of fun.
And Tosin, what was the song that they played at the end?
So the song they played at the end was "Burden in My Hand" by Soundgarden. Some fairly poignant lyrics if you listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Some around, it starts off, "Follow me into the desert as thirsty as you are, crack a smile and cut your mouth and drown in alcohol, because down below the truth is lying beneath the riverbed. So quench yourself and drink the water that flows below her head." So a lot of other interesting things in there, and also a pretty good song to boot.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this extra long episode of Quarantine Zone. We had a lot to cover for it was the end of the episode and the end of the season. I'm going to go around the table. I'll start with you, Dwayne. Where can people find your work on the internet while we're waiting for the next season of Quarantine Zone?
Well, while we're waiting for the next season of Quarantine Zone, check out QZ Pod on socials like Blue Sky and Twitter, because I think as news comes out, we're gonna throw the links up there, do a little discussion, that kind of thing. I think that's a good idea. So, Tosin, what about you?
You can find me on Instagram at BurntToast45. What about yourself, Andy?
My socials are Mr. Babyman. You can find me on all of my socials there. Again, QZ Pod for Blue Sky and X. We're on all the major podcast distributions. If you like our coverage on this show, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast for Prime Video's Fallout, which is called Vault 33. It's also available here on Buzzsprout and iTunes and Spotify and all the other podcast network. We'll be kicking that off for the second season of Fallout when that starts up. Until then, please drop us an email, tweet us, leave us a comment, and we will see you for the next season of The Last of Us here on Quarantine Zone.